Yeller, it's Alex Rosier here, and I'm so excited. It's a milestone episode. It's the first episode of the Always Rosier Show, where we're going beyond just my family's perspective on how we earn, spend, and invest our money, and we're going to you guys. We're going to the community. We're talking to just the normal people who are living their life, trying to live a life of purpose, while limiting the amount of financial stress and anxiety they have along the way, or people that want to do that. And today we got a guy, 34 years old, living in Idaho, as a civil engineer for local government, and he and his wife are doing it. They have goals and aspirations of retiring at 56, maybe sooner, and they're putting away money every month on $101,000 combined salary, and they're on their way, guys. It's an exciting story. It's an exciting episode, so stick around. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and we'll be trying to do multiple of these every week. So let me know down below, and let's get started. So let's just dive in. I mean, what stood out to me was, I read through some of your comments on Reddit. Obviously, like I mentioned, you're super engaged there, and you just seem like a relatively normal guy. Looked like you've been married for a little while. 32.
34 now. That's probably an old flag on my Reddit account saying I'm 32.
Nice. There you go. Cool. See, that's why it's better to talk in person. So there you go. 34, making $101,000 a year between you and your wife, but yet still managed to save up $586,000 towards your net worth, and it sounded like with aspirations to retire early. One thing, I guess, could you just talk to us a little bit about, well, first off, any corrections or anything you would like to fill in on yourself, and then maybe how you and your wife think about financial goals and what you've set up, what your financial goals are.
Sure. So my wife is Amy, and I'm a civil engineer building roads, working for a local government entity, and so sacrifice some lower pay in the engineering world for more job security and less stress, probably.
Yeah.
My wife also works for the same employer that I do, considerably less, but together combined $103,000 a year.
Nice.
And my wife is currently in school, pursuing a career change to become a database administrator, and that should increase her earning potential pretty considerably in about another year and a half. So that's something that we're looking forward to in the future, but for the time being, it's a whole lot of work where she's working full time and in school in the evenings, and I'm trying to pick up all of the slack. So
Yeah, I can imagine.
that's some of our finances in a nutshell. I started off with pretty lofty financial goals all the way back in high school. Understood compound interest, and knew that as soon as I was out of college, I wanted to start investing heavily to retire pretty wealthy. At least wealthy by the standards which I grew up in, which was just lower middle class growing up. My wife, on the other hand, never really had any financial aspirations. She's always the person, but wasn't really saving anything for retirement beyond her required pension match. When I met her, some things have changed in that regard, but it has been a good journey so far. And right out of college, I stuck with that plan and started attacking my student loans, which weren't too bad. I had $23,000 in student loans, which is probably lower than most. And rather than running out and buying a sports car like several of my other engineering friends did right out of college, I started saving for retirement, saving for a down payment on a first house, and trying to make the smart financial decisions early on, knowing that the 20s were really an important decade to get as much socked away for retirement while I was young, so the compound interest would have a long chance to do its work.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's crazy to hear you say that. I have a bunch of questions, but do you think, I mean, coming out of college, did you have clear goals set? I mean, you said lofty, you wanted a wealthy retirement, but did you put numbers down, or was it just kind of dreams at that point?
I knew I wanted to have $1 million, and knew that to have a decent retirement would require that. I don't think I had a particular number in mind other than I looked at what would it take to have $1 million by retirement, saw that was easy to hit, knew that I'd surpass it, and figured, well, sweet, I'm just going to go all in.
Nice.
We do have more specific goals now, having been tracking our spending for the last 5 years and knowing how much we spend and how much we would need to maintain the standard of living in retirement.
Sure.
That number's probably around 1.6 million.
Nice.
Using a 3.5% withdrawal rate.
Okay. And that's awesome. And just to clarify, the audio cut out a little bit, but was that $1 million coming out of college? That was kind of the ballpark in your mind?
That was an initial goal. I want at least that much for sure, and knew that I'd probably need more than that. But that seemed like a pretty lofty goal at the time, but achievable. I knew that it was achievable.
Yeah.
When I was 22, I was putting like $1,000 a month towards retirement.
Wow. That's amazing. And had you backed into, started forming a plan at that age as far as, I have this $1 million goal long term, and so I'm going to need to put this much away per month for this number of years in order to get there, or was it just you had $1,000 left over, so you put it there?
The latter. I did living like a poor college student for a while, and just suddenly had tripled my income coming out of college. And didn't feel like I needed that much more income, so just was stealing everything extra that I could afford towards retirement. And in the 13 years since then, I have had some quality of life creeping up.
Yeah.
And we certainly spend more now than I did when I was 22. But I think we get a lot of money that we do spend.
Do you attribute that mindset of wanting to save the $1 million and being willing to continue, not buy that sports car that all your friends were buying? Do you think that came from your parents? Is that how your parents lived growing up, even though they were, middle class?
Different sets of parents. They divorced when I was a kid, and then both remarried. So
okay.
On my dad's and mom's side, they made more money, and I know they invested pretty well for retirement, but they don't talk about money. That's like a taboo topic almost.
Yep.
It's just even if I try and bring it up, it's like pulling teeth. I can't get any specifics out of them.
Yep.
No idea what their net worth is at this point, but they're retired.
Got it.
And then on my mom's side, mom and stepdad were very vocal, and we'd have money and investing, and for a while they tried to get into the rental property game and tried to be small business owners, and they were constantly chasing that, but then plagued by repeated poor financial decisions that ultimately landed them in bankruptcy, and their house got foreclosed on in the smash. And they've retired today with Social Security, and my dad's pension, and that's it. My stepdad's teacher's pension, and that's about it.
Got it.
Or if anything, they're anti-role models as far as, all right, I don't want to end up there. I need to make some smarter decisions along the way. So,
yeah, and sometimes those anti-role models can be even more motivation than the perfect scenario. Well, at least I've found. Is there anybody else you can think of growing up that stood out to you as a role model on the positive side, or was it all just self-motivation based off the negative experiences you were seeing?
I had a grandpa, 4 grandpas. He tried to get all of his grandkids a little bit interested in investing, giving us money at Christmas or birthday, mutual funds or savings bonds and things like that. And I think of all his grandkids, one of the few that ended up showing any interest in investing. But I don't know that had a huge goal in where I ended up and my own motivations, but it was certainly some small contributing factor anyway.
Well, I guess let's go back to then, you mentioned, that was where you were, and it's super helpful. Thank you for sharing the background and all that you have shared. But going back to, so you came out of college with this, kind of arbitrary number in your head of at least $1 million. Then you got married, wife had a different background, different upbringing, different financial mindset. I can very much relate to that in my own relationship with my wife and I. And then, so how did conversations go there as far as, would you say you guys are aligned at this point?
We definitely are. She's full on board wanting to retire early and save more of our income towards that end. The remember us ever having like a one sit-down conversation where, hey, listen up, this is an important thing and you need to be investing for retirement. I'm sure it came up along the way when we were dating.
Yeah.
I do money and investing, but it was a slow evolution where as time went by and then eventually we got married, we just got more and more on the same page. And there were lots of things that happened in that way. It wasn't just money. Anytime two people are joining their lives together, you're reevaluating your values and your priorities and seeing what lines up with that other person. For example, she never wanted kids.
Okay.
And when we were dating and she first mentioned she didn't want kids, I was like, whoa, okay, that's a really unique idea. I was just kind of taking it for granted. Everybody grows up, gets married, buys a house, has kids. I never really stopped to ask myself, do I really want them? And as I started to ask myself that question, I realized I'm really not that crazy about having kids at all. So that might be a good fit for me and be able to retire earlier, your sports car, more travel, etc.
Interesting. And so as you guys went through that process of, shifting values as you got married and just figuring it all out, me and my wife have been married now for 3 years, so relatively young in our marriage, and I can very much relate to that process. Was there, you already mentioned it wasn't really a moment, a sit-down conversation, it was kind of an evolution. Have you since had a sit-down moment to establish clear financial goals, or has it still just been, okay, this is kind of how much we're spending, and this is kind of how much we're saving, so it looks like based off of that, we're going to get there by this time?
We discussed it regularly. It wasn't ever one sit-down conversation, but I'm definitely much more involved and interested in tracking all of the net worth and the monthly spending and all the spreadsheets. That's kind of my gig.
Yeah.
And once a month I'll send her a breakdown. Okay, here's how much we spent this month. Here's what we need to do better on next month if we went over budget in any particular items. Here's what our net worth is. Here's how much we still owe on the house.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how much our net worth has gone up in the last month, in the last year. It's just kind of fun for me to look at all those numbers and to have somebody along this journey with me that I can share them with and who takes the interest.
Yeah.
We do have some short-term goals and some long-term goals. Like some of the short ones are that all raises go towards investment, and that's something we've been doing for quite a long time now.
Nice.
We're trying to pay off my sports car. That was one of my weaknesses. We bought a 2015 Subaru STI
Nice.
back in 2014.
Awesome.
And I love that car, and I get a ton of fulfillment out of it, and I race to track it. But we financed it back then, and not all of it, but the majority of it. And so we're almost ready to pay that off. Probably next month it'll finally be paid off. So that'll be nice, big goal accomplished, and we have a goal to replace it immediately of never having another car payment ever again. We're just going to start taking the payment and socking it away for the next car that we buy. So
Yeah.
that's a short-term goal. That I'd like to save up for motorsports car upgrade for myself, but that's a few years down the road still.
Yeah, it sounds like that's your hobby, and I watched some of your YouTube videos, and it looked like you have a lot of fun on the on some of the local courses there, racing different cars, or at least tearing up the track a bit.
It's autocross racing. I've done track days and I've done rallycross, and it's an expensive sport, but as far as racing goes, autocross is about as cheap as it gets.
Nice.
About $100 a day as far as entrance fees and the tire wear on my car. You wouldn't believe the amount of tires I go through.
Yeah.
I'll get 4,000 miles out of a set of $1,000 tires when I'm daily driving it and taking it to the track every month. So
Wow.
that adds up to that.
Well, I must admit, I saw a few spin outs, and that was the first thing I thought was, wow, he must go through some tires.
It's so much fun, and I get a ton of fulfillment out of the money that it does. Makes it worthwhile too.
Yeah, and I love that. One of the big pieces of feedback that I got after posting the first video of my family's budget breakdown was everybody was giving me such a hard time around, why don't you go have some fun and really push off some of the savings you have and dedicate it to more splurges. And my wife and I honestly at this point feel like we are having a lot of fun in the city, but I love hearing my response to everybody is, yeah, like that's great. If you want to go have fun, that's fine. Just make sure you have it figured out in your plan and you know what you're giving up to do that. And it's not, obviously you guys you're having those discussions. You've been having those discussions for years, and yet you're still doing both. You're having fun and you're figuring out how to get to the financial goal of retiring early, and doing all of it on the $101,000 salary, which it sounds like came with its own. You already alluded to it with the local government kind of taking a bit of a pay cut for a different type of lifestyle. My wife and I do something similar there, and there's just something to be said there about having those real conversations, making those real decisions, but just being informed about it at least when you're making them, and knowing what the alternative is and what the trade-offs are. And it's just this whole concept of living with purpose instead of just kind of letting life, come and hit you in the face and then falling into the traps of advertisements and just like at the whims of the corporations or whatever. I don't want to be anti-corporation, but all the crap that we get sold all the time and not actually making our own decisions and figuring out our own lives and taking responsibility for it. So I love that you're having fun, and I mean, not that it matters what I think, but it's just cool to see.
I'm sure you saw some of our videos. We've done quite a bit of international travel too. We've gotten that bug ever since we took our honeymoon to Thailand.
Yeah.
And we loved that experience so much that we've made that a priority to continue to do. We've been to Africa, we've been to Vietnam and South Korea. And this year we just stayed closer to home and went to the Grand Canyon Park and stuff. And that's another way that we really get a lot of fulfillment together.
Yeah.
And it's a bit to go on those big trips, even if you are trying to do it on a shoestring budget. But it really is some of those memories that we look back over the last 5 years and say that was money well spent.
Yeah.
Even if it was a big chunk of money, it was worth it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess maybe it would be helpful to state what are your big kind of long-term retirement or retire early goals at this point? Obviously this will change probably going forward in the future, but as far as how much do you need to retire early, on what savings rate? You mentioned 1.6, I think it was, on a 3.5% withdrawal rate. And do you have a timeline on when you are hoping to hit that?
Well, my timeline originally had been 56 years old, because that's when I will hit my rule of 90 in my pension. The rule of 90 being when your age plus the number of years you worked for the government added together equal 90, then you can start collecting your pension without any reductions. And so I was going to hit that at 56 when I would have had a 30, 40. But now as we've started just in the fire community and see all these people retiring even younger and earlier, we started to question that. Do we really need to wait until we're 56? Could we afford to retire earlier than that at 50 or even a decade earlier at 46? Boy, that sounds hard to believe that we could do it in 12 years, but well, maybe it's possible.
Yeah.
And when my wife decided we were changed and went back to school, part of that was we were looking at you're supposed to be in demand in the next 20 years, because those in-demand careers are what's going to pay better. And figured if you could double your income to match closer to what I'm making, and we put all of that increase towards retirement, we could hit that magical 50% savings rate. And right now we're savings, but that magical 50%, if you're doing that for 10 years, enough that you could be in the neighborhood of retirement. So, that would put us, once she graduates and gets a better job, it'd probably be 35, 36. And, another 10 years after that puts me at 46. So, maybe by 50, we could be retired, which would be 6 years earlier. And a lot of it's going to depend on how I can stage accounts I'll have available to me, because the pension fund is a large portion of our net worth, and I won't be able to access that until I'm 55, regardless of when I quit working. So I'll have to have accounts to get by from whenever we do retire until then. From then again until Social Security can kick in, and as we get closer to those dates and see how much we have in different accounts, then we'll really have to start to look at, okay, how can we actually make it work year to year to get through. So
it seems like you're in an interesting situation with being a government employee, and then besides that also putting away a considerable amount of your own money. So you have both the pension, your own 401k, your own Roth I saw, and then your own HSA. Is that kind of what you see as making up your accounts?
The biggest chunk of all of that net worth is in that pension.
Yeah.
Both my employer's contribution and my influence. But all the other 401k, that's it. Worth by our house. And that's another one of our bigger goals, is to pay off our house by the time I'm 40 years old. So we've got another just over 5 years to go, and our house will be paid off before my 40th birthday, which will be a huge accomplishment. I'm looking forward to that. Then we'll take the house payment and we'll throw it into the 401k and Roth. And, at some point, we're going to finally max those accounts out. Have to start through a taxable investment account or do something different. But that's a few years out.
Yeah, and I noticed that as I looked over your net worth, it looked like you had about $208,000 written down for home equity, which came out to about 36% of your total net worth. And it looked like did you just buy that home just 2 years ago?
Bought it in 2014.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I actually had another house. My first home purchase was before I married Amy. I bought a manufactured home on 5 acres. It was kind of a dump, but it was cheap, and I could afford to get into it and just start building equity into something. And we sold that when we got married and bought this house. And this has been a really nice house. It's definitely more house than we need. It's a nice house with a beautiful view out over the river and the mountains and all that.
Wow.
But Amy's grandparents built this house back in the 80s.
Okay.
And Amy was living here with her grandma when we got married. And it's like, okay, living situation's got to change. Grandma, you're 95 now. What do you want to do? Into town to rent, and we were interested in buying the house from her. So we got a little bit of a family discount, maybe 10%. That helped.
Nice.
Build a little bit more equity, plus the equity from my previous sale gave us a little bit of a boost. And then the market since then has just taken off, and the value of the home has really gone up in the last 5 years, so that's helped.
I have my own interest in manufactured homes, actually more on the mobile home side from an investment perspective. And there's obviously a lot of controversy about those types of homes. Now you said it was a manufactured home, right? Which means that it's relatively similar to a stick built.
Well, it was a single wide trailer that came on axles.
Got it.
One of those manufactured homes.
Okay.
It was a 2000 Marlette. It was nice. It wasn't, a piece of junk.
Yeah.
But it definitely does not retain value the same way as a stick-built house does.
But you said you ended up doing well on it, or well enough.
It got me out of the rent. I've lived in it for 5 years. It met all of my needs, and I built up some equity. So.
When you look back on it, would you say that the equity was mostly in the land, though?
The majority of it was.
Yeah.
But, I developed that lot. When I bought it, it was just empty 5 acres of trees.
Okay.
I put in a well and power and septic, and then brought in this used manufactured home and converted it to real property, putting a foundation under it.
Interesting.
So I got out more than I paid to get everything in there. It's hard to say how much was the house versus the land, because they were sold as a unit together as real property when it was done.
That makes sense. And what was the decision to bring in that extra mobile home as you were developing the property further? Like, did you buy that mobile home used, and did you do any sort of analysis of, okay, this is how much this mobile home has been depreciating historically, or if I look at other similar mobile homes that are 10 years older, this is what I can expect from a depreciation. Just the only reason I ask here is because mobile homes are notoriously actually classified as vehicles, and some people think that they depreciate at a similar pace as vehicles, but maybe putting it on your own 5 acres, on its own foundation, maybe you had a different result there coming out of that.
I bought the mobile 18,000. I don't know how much it cost new, probably 30 or 40. The couple I bought it from lived in it while they built their house, and then their house was done, they moved in, then they were selling manufactured homes. And that had been kind of my plan. I was going to live in that while I built a house on 5 acres. But as time went by, priorities changed, and then when I was getting married to Amy, it's like, hey, we don't want to be in that area, we want to go a different direction. And so I sold it to another couple who had the same ambition. They wanted to live in that and build a house next to it at some point in the future. They still haven't done that, and it's been 5 years, so who knows if they ever will.
Yeah.
It's a nice enough home to meet the needs of a family just starting out.
Really appreciate how much time you've already given us here, but I just would like to kind of circle back to top line goals, get a little more insight into of those 4 accounts to retire at, maybe now almost 50, maybe whatever, even if it's your original goal of 56. One of the big accounts, one of the big unknowns to me is the pension within the government. And could you just give some insight into how that works? It looks like you have to contribute some while they contribute a majority of it, but is it a defined contribution type thing? Do you have to contribute in order to get access to that pension? Or could you just give us some insight on how that works?
Sure. It is a defined benefit plan, so it's a 403B, and it's called PERSI, the Public Employees Retirement System of Idaho, and I have to put in 6.5% of my paycheck that comes off the top before taxes or anything else get taken out, and then my employer puts in 11.5% more on top of my paycheck into it, I think, and I can't even see, if I go to the book to see what the balance of my account is, I can't even see how much the employer is putting in there. But knowing the ratio between how much I put in and what my balance is and how much they have to put in, I calculate in my spreadsheet what the value is that they put in. And when it comes time to retire, a list of formulas that will determine how much they will pay you for the rest of your life based on the highest 48 months of salary that you ever had. So if you make more toward the last 4 years of your career, or even if you made more in the middle of your career and got demoted or something, they'll take the highest 48 months of income and multiply that through some formula that also includes the number of months of service that you had. So, 30 years times 12 months and 300 of this really good. And I don't remember off the top of my head everything that goes into that formula, but they spit out a number. And right now, the last statement I got said, if I were to work until my rule of 90 at 56, and if I didn't ever get a raise between now and then, getting a payment of like $3,600 a month for life.
Nice.
And if they've got it where you can get a little bit more up front until Social Security kicks in, and then your pension payment will go down, and Social Security will kick in and cover the difference, and so your overall income shouldn't change when you start hitting Social Security age. There's also another option so that if you die, your spouse can continue getting the full amount, the amount, and if you take either one of the contingent annuitant options, they call it, then they'll pay you less per month, but if you die, your spouse continues to get it.
Right.
It's just that balance of how much does your spouse need once you croak, and you expect to outlive them. So.
And so you don't have any, they're investing all of this money for you. You're forced to put that 6.5% in, and then they put their contribution in, and then those formulas don't change as far as you're able to see what the formula will be based off of how many years you've worked, how many months, and then what your average last 2 years or highest 2 years of pay was. But other than that, what that formula will be when you retire. So you can plan for, like you said, $3,600 a month if you do what you've been doing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's if I work until I'm fit and hit my rule of 90.
Right.
If I quit working earlier than that, then the formula will still hold true. There'll just be fewer months of service.
And how about healthcare at retirement? Do they have any sort of healthcare?
I'll be on my own out between early retirement and whenever Medicare kicks in.
With that in mind, have you guys had any struggles as far as now we have this goal of, let's just call it 56, retirement at 56. Has there been any hard no's that you've had to confront when it comes to spending?
There definitely are. So things like reunion this summer in Michigan. It's like, well, okay, I'd love to go see the family, but taking us both to Michigan is not cheap. And with Amy being in school, one, she doesn't have much time because she's doing homework all the time, but with cash flowing her tuition, and we don't have a whole lot of extra money to just be at the plane tickets to go across the country right now, and so I'm going to have to say no to that one. And that one's hard because my grandma's getting old. It may have been the last time that the whole family will be together, or most of the family anyway, will be together while she's still around. That was probably the most recent big no. There's always more things that you want to go and do. Your friends are buying sports cars that cost twice as much as mine, and it's like, well, yeah, if I wasn't saving as much for retirement, I could go afford the new Corvette myself, just like you've got. But instead, I'm in the Subaru that costs half as much.
Right.
And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. But it's drawing the line somewhere for now. Online shopping, that's something that I have struggled with. It's just so easy to spend more and exceed your budgeted intention. And so I started making a list, the Google document, of all the things that I wanted to buy online. Okay, I'm adding it to my cart, but I'm not checking out yet. I'm going to add it to this list. Come back in a week. I'll see everything on the list. I'll reevaluate. All right, what of these are actually needs? What's the kind of impulse I wanted to buy it because it's cool or fun or whatever? And evaluating that list of needs versus, do I really want to retire earlier, or do I want to work another year so I can keep buying all I really need? So that just keeping that list has helped, and Amy, being as frugal as she is, really helped me cut down on extraneous spending too. And I get all these boxes at the front door and start to think, oh, I shouldn't have bought all this. There's just having somebody here to keep me in check helps a little bit. Not that she gets me into it or anything, but just her presence helps. So
I can totally relate to that. That's very similar to how my wife and I are. And it's funny because a lot of the comments we receive on our video about our budget were, man, where do you find yourself a wife that doesn't like to spend money? Or how do you find someone who's going to put up with somebody like yourself who wants to be cheap? And it's funny because while my wife actually came from a background and upbringing of a bit more money than what I'm used to, and granted we're both fairly young, so we're both establishing our own values at this point, but honestly she's better at keeping to the budget than I am. And it's just, I can totally relate to what you're saying there, as it's good to have at least, just an accountability partner, someone who's on board. And that's the thing I like about this whole thing the most is once you've had the conversations and you both know where you're headed, then you can have conversation, you both know where you're at, and you don't have to have yelling matches about why'd you do this, why'd you do that. It's just like, hey, did you know where this is coming from, or that's not in the budget, or whatever the case may be. Just little nods here and there, and if you're both on the same page, then it's just those little accountability moments that are useful for both. I can relate to them being useful for myself anyways.
More people say marriage is a lot of work, and with Amy, I have really not found that to be true. We're a team. We're on the same page together, and we don't fight. We don't yell. We hardly disagree. But everybody disagrees. But we just have conversations about stuff rather than arguments. So marriage is good in this house, and I am really blessed to have her in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think that is, not to be cliche, that's a perfect moment to end on. I think we could go on and talk about this stuff for hours, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to do it again in the future at some point and dive into specific moments. I know this specific conversation was kind of all over the place, but hopefully it provided some value to the community out there. And like I said, this is the first episode, so I would love to have you back on and maybe dive in, and maybe in a year or two we could recap and see if things have changed, see if priorities have shifted, and maybe you got that Corvette instead of the STI, or maybe you're still loving the STI. I must say myself, I've looked at the STI and that thing is sweet, so no qualms about that still being a fun ride.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me. I would love to check back in and give you an update on how life has progressed.
Cool.
Sometime down the road.
Awesome. Nice meeting you, Matt. Thank you. Well, there you go, guys. I hope that was insightful. This series is really just designed to be everyday people just living their life, having a goal in mind, thinking about finances, and then going and executing on the plan, and hearing those little struggles of daily life, of where we have to say no to ourselves sometimes. Sometimes we are committed to getting an education and paying for it in cash and not getting student loans, and we can't go to the family reunions. But sometimes, it's worth it for us. As long as we're having the conversation, that's all that matters. And it doesn't matter what other people are saying, oh, go do this, go do that. It's your life, so you figure it out. Let me know down below, comment down below, subscribe. Let me know if you liked this. If you didn't, don't let me know. Just kidding. Always let me know if you liked it or not, and any tips and feedback on getting better at the interview style. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.